Have you ever felt like you give too much? Always present, always ready, only to be met with indifference or neglect. We live in an age where being available is no longer rare. It's expected. Midnight texts, emails demanding instant replies, calls that presume immediate answers, and gradually, our presence loses its weight. But what if we step back, not to retreat, but to create gravity? Stoic philosophy is not some ancient relic buried in dust. It is a torch that lights the path to clarity amid the chaos. In this video, we'll explore 7 simple yet powerful practices, not only to earn deeper respect from others, but to live in closer alignment with the grounded self within. 1. Make your presence a gift, not a habit. We often confuse frequent availability with meaningful presence. When we're always there, instantly replying to messages, answering calls even at midnight, we unknowingly make ourselves predictable, replaceable. What's always accessible over time loses its value. It stops being seen as a gift and becomes a default, a convenience. The tragedy is, though we intend to be supportive and connected, our boundaryless approach leads others to undervalue our presence. Stoicism doesn't teach us to be distant or cold, but to be discerning, knowing when to step in and when to step back. Strategic absence isn't manipulation. It's the space where our true worth is realized. The person who always says yes rarely inspires gratitude. More often, they become taken for granted. Without clear boundaries, we risk falling into the trap of constant pleasing, giving so much that we forget to keep anything for ourselves. Appearing less doesn't mean being distant. It means being deliberate. It's showing up where it matters, with full attention and intent. By mastering the art of timely absence, we signal to the world that our time and energy are finite and worth respecting. This not only makes each presence more appreciated, but also helps us stay focused, restore our strength, and reconnect with ourselves. In an age of instant messaging and relentless pursuit, deliberate presence becomes rarity, and therefore precious. Rarity isn't arrogance, it's self-respect. By choosing where we show up, we silently declare, I don't belong to every conversation. I'm not required in every situation. I am not the one who must always fix everything. This brings clarity of role, of boundary, and compels others to pause and think. If they're here, it must matter. The value of our presence isn't tied to status or appearance, but by how we treat our time, our energy, and our focus. A Stoic knows to be present is a choice, not an obligation. So they resist the pressure to always be available, and instead appear where impact can be made, and retreat when space is needed for clarity, for self, for others to recognize what truly matters. From this lens, presence is no longer a reflex, but a conscious act, and each time we show up, it becomes a quiet reminder. Presence is a gift, not something to be demanded at will. When we regulate our presence with intention, we not only protect our worth, we teach others to treasure true connection, rather than expect it by default. 2. Stop the reflex of always being available. Start responding with intention. In the modern world, being constantly available has become a reflex, not a choice. We're swept up in a pace of life where quick responses are equated with responsibility and professionalism. A message arrives, reply instantly. The phone rings, pick up without hesitation. An email is sent. You feel compelled to respond. This cultivates a state of perpetual alertness, where the mind has no room to rest and the self is scattered into fragments. People expect us to be there the moment they call, and without boundaries, we reinforce that expectation and become enslaved by it. When we react without thought, our actions become automatic. Constantly responding strips us of the ability to choose. It steals the pause, the space to observe, evaluate, and consider what truly matters. In Stoic philosophy, the gap between stimulus and response is where self-mastery lives. When someone is rude, the reflex is anger. The conscious response might be silence, observation, or calm speech. A weekend work request may trigger guilt if declined, but the mindful response is to reassess priorities before deciding. Self-control doesn't come from doing more. It comes from choosing how we engage with the world. The always available person slowly loses the shape of someone with purpose and clear limits and becomes a convenient tool instead. This diminishes not just our perceived value, but our own sense of agency. Stoicism reminds us, no one can take your inner freedom unless you willingly surrender it. Each unconsidered reaction is a quiet act of surrender. Intentional response doesn't mean delay or neglect. It means responding at the right time, in the right way, grounded in awareness of one's values and context. It is purposeful action, not instinctual reaction. This requires setting boundaries, not to shut people out, but to remain anchored. A boundary might be as simple as not checking email after 7 p.m. or not answering calls during family meals. These small decisions are how we reclaim our time and attention. When we're no longer compelled to react immediately, we gain the clarity to see from multiple angles. The pause between someone else's action and our reply becomes space for discernment, compassion, or necessary silence. Those who embody this are seen as calm, grounded, and deep. They are not easily swayed by external noise because they've trained themselves to respond from within. Learning to pause before responding is a practice. In every interaction, observe yourself. Am I reacting out of fear of judgment, or because I genuinely want to contribute? Am I agreeing out of pressure, or because it aligns with my values? By asking these questions, we shift from passive to active, from unconscious to aware. And in this awareness, we regain control, not by doing more, but by engaging with clarity and purpose. 3. Cultivate mystery. Speak less, so they listen more. In today's world, where people constantly broadcast their private lives on social media and feel compelled to prove their worth through every post, photo, or update, holding something back has become rare. Mystery is no longer a common trait. It's been replaced by the urge to expose everything. Yet it's through restraint and selectivity that a person develops true depth and inner gravity. When not everything is revealed up front, others are drawn in, curious, attentive, and more likely to value what unfolds over time. Stoicism doesn't promote secrecy. It promotes self-governance. One may speak little, yet every word carries weight. Every action mirrors inner principles. They don't need to talk about who they are. Their life speaks on their behalf. Measured speech not only elevates the meaning of each word, but builds trust and quiet authority. People tend to respect those who aren't easily deciphered because they sense intention behind the silence and boundaries guarded with care. Those who overshare may seem approachable at first, but over time, respect fades. Constant exposure dulls the listener's curiosity. No effort is needed to understand, no reason to listen closely, no motivation to preserve the connection. On the other hand, when sharing is deliberate, every disclosure carries meaning. It signals trust, and people lean in. They listen because they know what's being said has been carefully chosen. Keeping parts of ourselves private is also how we protect our peace. Not everyone needs to know what we think, feel, or face. Silence in certain moments isn't coldness, it's control. In Stoic thought, silence can be the most powerful response when words no longer serve. One may witness conflict without intervening, Hear criticism without defending. Observe without needing to judge. That's strength. That's maturity. Mystery also preserves space for the self. When too much is spent in words and exposure, the mind fragments. But when thoughts, emotions, and experiences are kept inward, they can be processed more deeply, understood more clearly, and lived more fully. The quiet person is not empty. They are selective. They don't crowd the room with noise. They shape silence that demands attention. And in that stillness, others begin to truly listen, not just with their ears, but with their full presence. In a noisy and hurried world, the one who masters restraint and carries quiet mystery becomes an uncommon anchor. People are not drawn to what's overexposed. They are drawn to what requires discovery, what unearths over time. This is the power of mystery. Not to impress, but to preserve meaning and inner depth. 4. Create opportunities for others to invest in you. In a culture that glorifies absolute independence, many grow up believing that doing everything alone is a mark of strength. Asking for help or accepting it is often seen as weakness or inadequacy. Yet in the reality of human relationships, no one truly becomes strong in isolation. Every meaningful connection is built on the act of giving and receiving. When we deny others the chance to help us, we're not just turning down support, we're preventing a deeper bond from forming. Allowing others to invest in us is not passivity, it's a deliberate openness, a way to make space for authentic connection to emerge. In Stoic philosophy, strength isn't found in isolation, but in mastering how we engage with the world. A person who lives with intention understands that control doesn't mean managing everything alone. Sometimes, true control lies in knowing when to let go, when to let others join the journey. Accepting help at the right moment is a sign of maturity because it demands the surrender of ego, the willingness to trust, and the courage to let someone step into our inner world. It's an act of construction, laying the groundwork for lasting relationships built on mutual respect and trust. Those who are open to being invested in are often the ones who clearly understand their own boundaries. They don't demand, nor do they expect unreasonably. They simply allow space for others to contribute if they genuinely wish to. This makes the interaction organic, free from pressure or manipulation. When someone gives their time, effort, or ideas to support you, they feel more connected because human nature seeks meaning, usefulness, and belonging. When we turn away from that opportunity, perhaps out of fear of obligation or debt, we also turn away from a potential anchor, something that could become a steady support in the future. Investment isn't always material. Sometimes it's time, a word of guidance, or a small gesture that helps us move forward. When we receive it with gratitude, our appreciation becomes visible and trust grows. In strong relationships, connection doesn't come from one person giving endlessly without return. It comes from the sense that both are building something together. When others feel they can contribute to your growth, they don't just see their role, they recognize the relationship's meaning in their own lives. That's the foundation for lasting bonds, rooted in shared emotional investment, not transactional gain. Creating space for others to invest in you is a subtle art. Not everyone deserves a place in your inner circle, but once someone proves their sincerity, let them in. Maturity isn't just knowing what you need, it's knowing when to let others walk beside you, offer support, and share the weight. In a life lived with depth and intention, the most meaningful moments aren't always the ones you conquer alone. They are the ones where you open the door just enough for someone else to become part of something greater, not only for you, but for them as well. 5. Put yourself first, and don't feel guilty about it. In many cultures, putting others' needs before your own is praised as a noble virtue. However, when this becomes a habit without boundaries, it easily leads to exhaustion, resentment, and the erosion of self. Many feel guilty for taking time for themselves, as if it's a selfish act. They sacrifice sleep, postpone caring for their health, and give up quiet moments to meet the demands of family, work, and society. But when the inner cup is empty, we can't keep pouring without breaking down. Putting yourself first isn't about pushing others away. It's about rearranging priorities to ensure that what we give comes from fullness, not depletion. In Stoic philosophy, a grounded life begins with inner stability. Each person is responsible for their own physical, mental, and emotional well-being. No one can carry this task for us, nor can anyone understand our needs better than we do. When we prioritize ourselves, we're making a commitment to stay clear, balanced, and strong enough to face the world's uncertainties. Self-mastery cannot survive in a burnt-out body or a constantly strained mind. It requires a firm foundation built on rest, renewal, learning, and silence. Putting yourself first is also an act of self-respect. Those who care for themselves don't do so to avoid responsibility to others, but because they understand that the first duty of any person is to their own life. Saying no to an invitation, turning down an ill-fitting job offer, or taking a full day off isn't selfish. It's the setting of healthy boundaries. Those boundaries not only protect us from being used, but teach others how we wish to be treated. When we give ourselves permission to come first, others learn to respect that, rather than assuming our sacrifice is automatic. In life and in relationships, there will be times when we must step back to recover. Not every pause is a sign of weakness. Sometimes, it's the necessary preparation for sustainable forward movement. When body and mind are well cared for, we make clearer decisions, act with greater resolve, and show up more fully in our relationships. On the other hand, constantly pushing to meet others' expectations wears down our energy, dulls our passion, and erodes our natural compassion and creativity. No one else can grant us permission to put ourselves first. That responsibility is ours alone. Guilt is a product of old beliefs, of teachings that claim we are only good when we give unconditionally. But a sustainable life doesn't come from constant giving. It comes from a balance between giving and preserving. When we pull back to care for ourselves, we're investing in the long-term capacity to show up authentically, powerfully, and deeply for the people we care about. On the path of mindful living, putting yourself first isn't a luxury. It's a foundation. Not because we are more important than others, but because we too are human, worthy of care, respect, and being heard, just like anyone else. 6. Be the protagonist of your life, not a supporting role in someone else's. Many people spend their lives as pleasers, constantly trying to fit the expectations of others, forgetting they have a life of their own to live fully. They prioritize others' emotions, opinions, and needs so much that they gradually lose their own boundaries. When this goes on long enough, they no longer recognize which choices are truly theirs and which are just reactions to maintain temporary peace. They become supporting characters in someone else's story, showing up only when called, acting only with approval, and slowly surrendering the steering wheel of their own lives. In Stoic thought, self-mastery is the root of dignity. A life well lived is not built on external approval, but on internal clarity about what truly matters. When we live just to be accepted, we fall into a loop of adjusting ourselves to meet standards others set. But those standards are ever shifting, and we become boats drifting with the tide. Only by knowing who we are, what we want, and living by our own principles Can we hold the helm steady amid life's uncertainties? Being the protagonist doesn't mean pushing others away. It means not letting others dictate your path or define your worth. It takes courage to make decisions, especially when they're unpopular. It demands resolve to follow your path, even if it's not the common one. Along the way, you will feel alone, because being true to yourself often means stepping outside what's familiar. But in that very moment, you come close to real freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to live without being enslaved by others' approval. When we hand over decision-making to others, whether family, friends, or society, we surrender part of our will. Relying on external reactions causes us to reshape our emotions, actions, and values just to stay liked or accepted. But those reactions are fleeting. Seeking stability in a world of flux is pointless if that stability doesn't come from within. To be the protagonist is to take responsibility for your actions, your outcomes, your choices. No more blaming, no more hiding, no more silence out of fear. What remains is clarity, self-respect, and commitment to yourself. Living as a supporting role puts you in a constant state of waiting for permission, for recognition, for a chance to speak. But time waits for no one. Each passing day is a new chapter in your story, and if you don't write it, you'll be written into someone else's. Being the protagonist doesn't mean being right all the time, or always being strong. It means showing up fully with everything you are, everything you believe, and everything you're becoming. Life then becomes more than a reaction to outside forces. It becomes a journey with direction, depth, and intention. That's how each action, each choice, each step gains meaning, not just for others, but first and foremost, for yourself. 7. Learn to be silent and let your presence speak for you. Silence is a powerful form of communication, yet often underestimated in a world where words rush to fill every gap. Modern life pulls people into a constant urge to express, where silence is mistaken for weakness, ignorance, or indifference. But in truth, silence is a conscious choice, a reflection of composure and self-mastery. When we no longer feel compelled to answer every question, react to every stimulus, or jump into every conversation, we begin to find space for observation and insight. In that stillness, presence becomes more vivid than ever. Stoicism honors the strength of restraint, and silence is one of its clearest expressions. Those who know how to stay silent do not lack things to say. They simply know when to speak and when to hold back. They don't need to assert themselves with words, because their presence alone carries gravity. They listen not just to reply, but to understand. They observe not to judge, but to perceive the subtle movements in speech, behavior, and emotion. In heated conversations, they don't interrupt or fight to be right. They remain centered, witnessing the flow of emotion. It is this steadiness that gives their words, when spoken, depth and weight. Silence is also a way to avoid being swept up in impulsive reactions. When insulted, challenged, or criticized, the instinct is to defend, retaliate, or explain. But those who practice silence create space between emotion and action, resisting external agitation. In that moment, they preserve their calm, protect their energy, and demonstrate control. Their silence doesn't make them weak. It makes them unreadable, grounded, and immune to the impatience of others. True presence doesn't come from the volume of one's voice, but from the quality of one's attention. A person who is fully present, even without speaking, can still radiate safety, trust, and influence. They draw attention, not through noise, but through the meaning behind their stillness. When they enter a room, they don't need to speak to command respect. They prove nothing, because the way they stand, observe, and see already says enough. In relationships, the right silence can open space for others to share, reflect, and feel truly heard. Something words alone often fail to achieve. In a world overwhelmed by urgency, learning to be silent is a practice of endurance. It requires accepting uncertainty, rejecting the need for instant recognition, and turning focus inward rather than reacting to everything outside. Those who master silence learn to show up fully without needing a wall of words to shield them. And in doing so, they attract others, not by performing, but by simply being. Their silence doesn't erase their voice. It gives their voice more weight, more timing, more meaning. In a noisy world, mindful silence becomes the clearest voice of a soul that has learned to govern itself. I once believed that to earn others' respect, I had to always be available, always agreeable, and never let anyone down. I thought kindness meant ignoring my own needs, sacrificing my time and energy just to keep the peace in every situation. But the more I lived that way, the more depleted I became, disconnected from who I was, and no longer feeling genuinely valued. People began to take my presence for granted. They expected immediate replies, constant availability, and if I ever said no, it suddenly became a problem. That was when I realized the issue wasn't them. It was how I had failed to set boundaries for myself. When I started practicing the principles of Stoicism, I learned to step back, not to withdraw, but to reclaim authorship of my life. I became more selective about where I showed up. I allowed myself to remain silent when nothing needed to be said. I began to say no when something didn't align with my values. And most importantly, I learned to prioritize myself. Strangely, when I did that, people didn't distance themselves the way I feared. Instead, they began to respect my time, my space, and my choices more. I felt lighter, no longer burdened by the need to fit someone else's mold. In the end, I no longer needed external validation to feel worthy. I just had to live in alignment with what I knew to be true, and that was enough. So let me ask you, will you keep letting others write your life story? Or will you take the pen and begin writing it yourself? If you're ready to become the main character in your own life, drop a comment below. I will take ownership of my life. And if you want to continue your journey of inner growth, self-mastery, and applying the wisdom of Stoicism to everyday choices, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss future videos. Don't wait for someone else to give you the miracle that changes your life. You are that miracle. See you in the next video.